IVM.
This episode contains references to mental and physical illness, harassment, and other upsetting themes.
You're listening to Storytellers and Storysellers on the IVM Podcast Network. This is Vineet Kanabar live on tape. Today's episode is very special to me for multiple reasons. I have always been a massive webcomics fan. Way back when questionable content and XKCD and Pearls Before Swine used to be a thing, to now where Instagram has really become a fillip for webcomic creators to take on complex issues and really simplify them. One of the guys that I really follow is called Storyseller Comics, right? Which is completely unintentional coincidence. We have never met before and we didn't decide this. But very, very glad to have Harshveer Jain from Storyseller Comics on today's episode of Storytellers and Storysellers. Hi, Harshveer.
Hi.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Great to have you on, man. And before we get started and talk more about your work and Storyseller Comics and Qrius, I just want you to know that you're allowed to make sex jokes on this show. Right?
All right.
Let me quickly jump into this and ask you. We're recording this right after Diwali. Harshveer, how was Diwali for you, man? I know it's a time when everyone goes home. I know you're at home as well. How was it for you?
It was lovely. So I was home 3 days before Diwali and I just got back from Rishikesh. And so the 2 weeks before that were amazing. And then the day I got here, I had to meet a couple of friends. And then, it was just very hectic because I just kept meeting people that shouldn't be talking about how here, but we all wore masks and sanitation, got ourselves checked. I got my test done as soon as I was back. And on the day of Diwali at 10 p.m., I kind of passed out. So I sort of escaped all the crackers and the noises people then complained about the next. So,
yeah. The crackers are a sore point in general, I think. I didn't miss crackers at all. I haven't burst crackers in a while and I didn't miss them this time around as well. Don't burst crackers, guys. No matter how much hate we get for saying it, just don't do it. It makes no sense. It doesn't make sense on Diwali. It doesn't make sense on Christmas. It doesn't make sense on New Year's. Just don't do it. But all of that aside, let's turn our attention to Harshveer and ask him about Storyseller Comics. Right? Tell us more, man. I know you're not quote unquote an artist. I have read enough and more about you saying that the drawing part of it is what is the most difficult aspect of this of putting out Storyseller Comics for you. But take us to the start, man. How did you get started with Storyseller, and where are you right now in that journey?
Do you want a long version or a short version?
It's a podcast, man. You always want the long version.
Cool. So what happened was I got banned from Facebook a couple of times in my undergrad.
Right.
That happens because in our undergrad, we have something called midterm, end-term RG. If you all remember Chatur from 3 Idiots, the concept of RG is, it exists, but it's not in the same vein as it was shown in the movie. What happens is everyone just joins in and everyone's just enjoying and having a good time. And everyone's online, we're on their laptops. So at that time, what we were doing we were impersonating people on Facebook, like celebrities. Like we change our name, profile pictures, and we just behave as if we were that person. I picked up Anu Malik and I started putting up random poetries on people's accounts. And my own brother sort of reported abuse because he didn't know who this was. He thought this was some Anu Malik impersonator. So Facebook banned me the first time. The second time it happened, it was something else. So I didn't have a social media account and I had to get to some place to access social media. So I joined Instagram and I don't have pictures of myself. I can't take good pictures of food. I don't travel so much. So I didn't really have anything to share. And then I had some comics that we had made when I was working with housing about flatmates and living as a bachelor. And I posted those and people seemed to like them. At that time, I was also working with Bain and we used to have office-wide emails about inviting people to parties, and I didn't like sending an email with a meme, so I'd draw my own thing. We had a touchscreen laptop. It was pretty cool to do something on paint using a stylus on the screen. That also was something people liked. So I thought I can express using simple drawings and doodles. And I'm a huge XKCD fan. I think very few people I'm comfortable saying I'm a fan of is XK series. So I wanted to do something of that sort since my undergrad anyway. I started with that's why the comics and the visual aspect of the page, even though I'm not an artist.
Right.
And the kind of content I do, if you want me to go into that.
Please do.
So if you see, it's I try to explain stuff in through anecdotes or stories, or try to bring logic or science into things. That's primarily because I personally lack empathy. I have zero like EQ, and because of that, a lot of my past relationships, both romantic and non-romantic, for instance, my own brother, family, friends, everywhere, like people expect a certain sort of emotional intelligence and sort of camaraderie from a person, and I don't have that. I lack it. I don't understand emotions well. And so my and this is something I call the origin story. Like I think every superhero and supervillain has an origin story. This my origin story for this was when my brother turned 16. I sent him a bunch of letters saying that how we are friends and we're brothers and everything, and he responded with like a simple like, you're not a friend, you're not a brother, we just like born to the same parents, that's it. And that really hurt me because I love him and I thought he loved me as well. But
Is he older than you, younger than you?
younger. He's 5 years younger to me. So I was like, okay, what went wrong? How did this happen?
Right.
And then I sort of introspected and I realized that I did not realize that when he was young and I was his like best friend and I was his older brother. And then I began studying for my JE and everything, and I sort of like left him stranded, right? And I didn't realize that that would have hurt him, because for me it was something normal that I was doing, and I would expect that from any elder brother कि पढ़ाई में जा रहे हैं तो पढ़ाई करेंगे. But I didn't capture his emotions, and then we talked and I realized his side of things. So I wanted to sort of break down different things. So this is about empathy and emotions, but also about respecting other people, body positivity. I am a huge lifestyle fitness junkie, and I've had very bad phases in my life where I used to hate my body. Then about feminism, I have been a huge jerk to people. Like I think till about 21, 22, I used to think that men and women are built different because of evolution, and we have different roles because like one person has to give birth and take care of the baby, and therefore that person can't go out in the world and hunt, and the other person has more testosterone, so we can go and hunt.
Mhm.
And that sort of built my whole world view. And of course, that was wrong, and I learned that over time. But I needed anecdotes and stories and people to explain things to me. So a lot of effort has been put into by different people into the comics that I make. They just don't know it because like I talk to them and I sort of get those insights, and then I build my stories and anecdotes around that. So that's why I do this, just to make sure people like me who are not maybe bad at heart or don't have bad intentions but are kind of just like stupid can sort of be less stupid about things.
So it's a very, very lovely and very heartfelt sort of introduction to what you do, and it resonates, man. It resonates with me as a now quote unquote woke guy from the internet. What a lot of people don't tend to understand or tend to disregard is the process of learning and unlearning that goes into doing so much that you do now, or holding the views that you hold now, which are considered progressive and woke and all that, right? I mean, I want to ask you so many things because I relate to your journey as well, not just from that unlearning perspective, but also backgrounds, right? I'm an engineer as well. I spent a lot of time in testosterone-fueled groups of men who believed that abhi hum hi hai, bas Indian male, best in the world, sort of, right? But we'll get to that in a second. I want to focus to start with on your process of putting the comics together, and then deep dive into learning and unlearning empathy and other things, right? So I read on one of your interviews that you make these comics late at night. There is this sort of hunger to create that you have, right? That your brain doesn't shut down till you kind of put something out there. Tell us a little bit more about that, right? Because a lot of people tend to put that brain on pause and find ways to distract yourself, and then there are people like you who will find that hunger to do something interesting, not just for yourself but for others around you. So talk to us a little bit about that.
So one thing is very simple here. I'm a very vain person. I like recognition, and not just from other people but from myself. Like I need to constantly keep impressing myself to sort of be able to live with myself. I am like a huge fan of my own self. And to be able to live that life, I need to continuously like keep getting better at who I am. There's this quote from Shah Rukh when he was at his peak, and he said that when people ask me, like, how does it feel when others are doing well? Like, do you feel competitive? And he said, I'm running a league of my own. Like, no one can touch me because I'm not competing with them.
Right.
And I'm a huge Shah Rukh fan, both like work and opinions in some ways. Like, I don't know him personally, so I can't comment on who he is, but like what he says. So this is something I also do, right? So every day when I'm thinking or I am like about to sleep, I look back at the day. Not look back, I don't consciously, it just happens. And if I haven't used my brain or if I haven't achieved something or done something, it could be anything. I'm not able to sort of rest my brain. It's both a boon and a bane that I can't rest till I have done something, but also it's like presses me into doing stuff.
Right.
It's difficult, but it's also nice. So that's why, like, that's the whole story about not being able to sleep because I'm hungry. So that's vanity. And second, I also have a lot of things to say. So because I think a lot, I talk to a lot of people. I live for like meeting people and listening to their stories. And that's why like people have travel as passion or something else. My passion is just meeting people and like talking to them.
Right.
So I have a lot of things to say and understand, and I have a lot of questions. I've always been very inquisitive. So if you have questions, you also want to seek answers, and once you seek answers, you want to like talk about those answers. So that's also there. So this is also an outlet for me to kind of express myself. I know no other way except art. I can't dance, I can't sing. So this is what I have to express myself.
That's brilliant, man. I mean, I love the sort of self-awareness and sort of dripping honesty that's coming through in your answers. Let me ask you this. You said you don't know any other way. And then you also talk about how drawing is not your strong suit, right? And I want to take you back to when you were starting out. I'm sure it's a lot of hard work to put something down that looks good and says the thing that you want it to say, right? I mean, people don't want to read. Who wants to read anymore? And nobody wants to read, right? They want to see. And that's where the format that you've come up with, which is, I mean, clearly there's a Randy Monroe inspiration there, but there's a lot of you in there as well, right? Tell me how you work through self-rejection, right? Because I think that, I'm sure, has played a part, especially when you were learning to draw. How did you work past that self-rejection of, hey, I don't know how to draw, but still I need to put out something that's passable, that's shareable, that people will like. How was that phase for you?
Honestly, I didn't really face self-rejection because I knew I couldn't draw. Like, it wasn't a revelation for me.
Right.
Like, I knew if I get a paintbrush in my hand, I will just produce shit. So I wasn't expecting myself to produce something beautiful to begin with anyway. And when I started sketching, like, my sketches were horrible. They weren't even proper stick figures.
Right.
But one more thing, the vanity bit kicks in here. I didn't really give a about what people would think because I was like, I need to impress myself. And when it comes to, let's say, visual art, I'm a very content person. The story, the dialogues, not the aesthetics person. So anyway, I wasn't looking to be aesthetically pleasing to myself.
Right.
I was my own audience, so that helped.
That's, I would say, very less valued, or very rarely do you hear that as a pearl of wisdom, right? Like, I was my own audience, I'm creating for myself. Everything else is a byproduct. I'd love to be famous. I'd love to get validation from everybody else, but the first person I need to impress is myself. That's a very interesting starting point. Let me flip this over and talk about empathy, right? Now the way I look, and I think from what I know of you, from what I've read of your comics and the stuff I read about you, very clear and sharp outtakes especially for the Indian male that there are in your comics, right? Like, I mean, if someone asked me to put together a volume of work that should be quintessential reading for the Indian male, a few of your comics would definitely be there. Tell me more about how you've learned empathy for yourself, and what you would take from that learning, and how are you trying to take that to the Indian male? Because God knows that the Indian male needs it more than most other cohorts. in the world. I mean, would you agree with that first up? And then the rest of it.
I don't know. I have been very protected that way. Like I grew up in a very happy, nice household,
Right.
and both my parents are amazing. And in fact, that's one reason that it really hit me when I went out in the world and went to my colleges and lived in hostels and then work and talked to people and heard about their families. That's when I realized that not everyone has that protected or privileged a childhood as I had. And that's when I realized that there is a lot of problem in the world that people face. I have just been so shielded from all of it that I just thought everyone should be happy and like chill in their life. And when I realized that that's not the case for everyone, not everyone can be Hakuna Matata all the time.
Right.
That's when I don't know where the question was, but yeah, like the whole Indian male thing, I can't comment on it because the first Indian male I looked up to was my dad, and he's amazing. So
Right.
I won't generalize the whole population that way.
Sure.
Like I've seen the gem, like I've lived with the gem. So, but yeah, what was the question again?
It was about learning empathy, though. I mean,
Yeah,
Indian male apart, for yourself, right? You mentioned it wasn't a strong suit, or it wasn't something that you inherently had as a quality. How did your drawing, or how did putting art out there, or meeting people, how did you learn that bit of empathy? How did that come?
oh, it's a lot of emotional labor from a lot of people that has gone into making my head clear.
Right.
And then I've consciously started seeking out opinions and thoughts and listening to and reading about and from people who have, let's say, have had set of experiences that I haven't. And the whole thing I said about how I met people in college and realized that my life has been a very drastically different experience than most average people. That sort of opened my eyes that yes, there are people with different experiences. And I think that's the most important part, when you realize that your experience, no matter how valid and how, let's say, 100% honest you can be about your experience, someone else will have a different experience. And if you can't place yourself in their shoes, it's fine, because not everyone has that imagination or that emotional intelligence to be able to sort of feel what the other person is feeling. But you can at least try to understand their behavior. And that's what I have tried to do, where I can't put myself in someone else's shoes. I try to understand, okay, why are they walking the path they are walking? This also stems from being a physics undergrad. Like when you study physics, no, you are not the object, you're an observer.
Right.
And you use maths and physics to try to figure out what the object is doing, why the object is behaving the way the object is behaving, and what would they do in the future based on that. That gives you a very third person observational perspective about the world. And I try to apply that lens to life in general. It might sound a little horrible that I am sort of looking at people from an observer's perspective and becoming like mightier than thou in that sense, but it's helped me become a better person. So work for me at least.
No, definitely. I think that is the most, how do you say, you can call it journalistic, you can call it gonzo, you can call it a writer's perspective, whichever name you want to give it. But I think it is a certain trait for people who interpret the world for other people as well, right? That's the trait. Yes, sure, it does give you a sort of that sense of, hey, I'm using somebody else's learning or misfortune or lived experience to better your own character. But I think that drive, and again, this is just my sort of cliff notes on this, but it's that drive, right? Not enough people have that drive as well to learn from others for yourself, and then use that to amplify the learning that you have in a simple, easy to understand, non-preachy sort of a way. So I think as a fan, I think you've made great progress, man, in being able to do that. Let me flip this over and ask you about the Indian dream, right? IIT Bombay, engineering, and IMC, if I'm not mistaken, for your MBA. That's the Indian dream, right? Like, that's it right there. Science will delivered, parents happy, all good. Contrast that experience, right? I mean, first of all, was it as advertised for you, the entire Indian dream experience?
Oh, it's lovely. The colleges are amazing. Like, I wouldn't say it's the education as much as just the experience of being in such an amazing institute that, like, plus, I mean, of course, the whole part about I have a safety net now. Like, I can do whatever I want to in life, fail and just like get into the job market and I'll be hired immediately.
Right.
I'm very secure that way. But the whole experience of the in college life, it's superb.
I mean, what were you into while you were there? I mean, I know that a lot of people, quote unquote, Maggu class will go and do what they need to do. You don't come off as one of those. So, what were you into? What did you really enjoy out of that experience?
Both were different. Undergrad was completely different from my postgrad experience.
Right.
Undergrad, it was at first just meeting a bunch of amazing people, and by a bunch, I mean pretty much everybody. The perception could be that people in IIT would be Madhu and they would sort of study for the sake of studying, but that's really not true. And that's mainly because people are just so smart, they don't need to be a Maggu to be good at studies.
Right.
That's like the lion having a giant mane, because the lion can afford to have that mane even if you can't see if you have that giant mane.
Right.
So in that sense, everyone was very secure that they're into a good college. Who people are smart, and like for the first time in my life, I was just surrounded by people who were way smarter than I was in the traditional sense. So when I say way smarter, it means that I wasn't the person who was, let's say, the professor's favorite, or I wasn't the person who was winning accolades. And that really changes your perspective if you're coming from a childhood where you've always been like the topper.
Right.
And then to meet those people and see them having their different worldviews and opinions, and realizing that not everyone who studies has the same opinion on in the world. Like, because in school, you're probably 3 or 4 kids who are serious about studying throughout their life. Like, you have like 5, 10 people who are studying and who are focusing on books and classes. But in an institute like that, everyone's just capable to do that, and still choosing to not do that and do other things. You need a lot of passion to let go of something that has given you so much success, and then not do it consciously and do something else. So people would learn how to dance, learn how to paint, and they'd get amazing at it in a couple of years. So that's what everyone does. In that was undergrad. What I did was, I was working for my college fest, and that experience really opened me up to a lot of different perspectives, both from a gender spectrum, a class spectrum. We used to host a lot of colleges from DU, from Bangalore, from Chennai, and you talk to those people, and like they'd open your eyes about their worldview. So it was a very eye-opening experience in terms of people, in terms of infrastructure. I think IIT Bombay is the best clubhouse in the country. You've got like this amazing swimming pool, this amazing ground, this amazing gym. You can just have the life you want to live. So I used to work out a lot. I used to focus on my sort of fitness and lifestyle a lot. And you have these wizards who like get every content there is in the world onto your laptop. Like there'll be a lot of piracy, of course, but that happens. So all the movies, music, TV shows you want. So it's just an immense sea of possibilities in terms of how much do you want to open up yourself to the world. And the whole world is available to you. Everything that you want to do in the world, you can do in that small, tiny campus. So that's just a giant sort of infinity you're staring at sitting from your tiny room.
Right.
So that was undergrad. So if I have to sell this to somebody, this is how I'd sell it. Of course, the placements and all are there, but that's a very short-term thing. Eventually, what I remember about my college is this part, not that it got me a nice package.
Humble brag.
And then postgrad was separate, because you go to an IIM where there are people who sort of lived their adult life now. They've spent 5, 10 years being an adult. People are about to get married. They've spent time in a couple of jobs, gotten fired, gotten rehired. There are people who are spending close to 20, 30 lakh as a conscious decision. Like undergrad in India is like a given thing. Everyone does college and your parents mostly pay for it, and it's not that expensive as well. MBA is super expensive. There are people who are taking that conscious call of ditching a job that's probably going to pay them 30, 40 lakh over 2 years and paying an additional 30 lakh of fee. That's like a half a crore investment they're making into their future.
Right.
So the perspective that they come into the college is with very different from a fresh-minded undergrad student. And then the college itself, for the first time in your life, you're an adult and you have all the freedom you want. Like undergrad, you are just entering adulthood. You're still not independent.
Right.
But in MBA, you are completely independent. You have your bank account to fund whatever debauchery you want to fund it, fund, and you have all the time and like peace in the world, because usually postgrad is also chill that way. So glorified job exchange in that sense. Once you have a job secured, you have all the time in the world to do whatever you want to do.
Did you go straight from IIT to IIM, or did you have like a couple of years of working in between?
I spent 10 months with housing.
Oh, right. Okay.
But that was mostly an extension of my college. It was basically an air-conditioned hostel for me. Everyone was from IIT Bombay.
Right.
So it just felt like college. In that sense, I was still an undergrad when I went to my MBA college. And the college itself, okay, Calcutta is a beautiful campus. We have got 7 lakes. I'm a huge water baby. So the whole idea of being in a campus with just so much water. So IIT Bombay had a lake, then Calcutta had a lake. So I was very happy that day.
Right.
The facilities are not that great, but the people, the perspectives, and the life that you can live, it's a great vacation. And you're coming out of that vacation with possibly better professional careers. So it's in that sense very. It's just a happy place to be at.
Did you continue doing fests at IMC as well?
No, I completely transformed who I was, what I was doing. In undergrad, I was very active. I was very social. I was doing my college fest, meeting people, participating in everything I could participate in.
Right.
But again, this is vanity because I had been in IIT Bombay and no other college in the country can beat our college's sort of vibrancy in terms of culture and college festivals. Calcutta's did not seem like that attractive or intriguing to me. So I chose to do other things in college which were more interesting as a grown-up adult with money.
Right.
Yeah.
That's fantastic, man. I think that computes, right? I mean, after Moodai and TechFest, everything else does feel a little small in comparison, right? Again, I mean, I've had very, very close friends pass out of IIT Bombay now almost a decade ago. And I spent a few months hanging around IIT, either whether it's for TechFest or just because I had a couple of months off in summer and my friends were interning. It's obviously an entirely different world. Joka, I haven't been, to be honest, although I do have, again, a bunch of friends who speak very highly of it. But I think you put it very nicely, right? That it's if you can look at it like that, if you come from that kind of privilege to look at it as a vacation / professional training out of after which you will be hugely employable in any job market in the world, it's an experience like no other at all, right? Let me take forward from that and ask you about your career trajectory, right? You started out with consulting at Bain, and then you kind of pivoted into what is now a media content consultancy, sort of called Qrius, right?
Yeah.
How did you explain that to your parents?
Oh, my parents are super weird. They don't ask these questions to me.
Oh, they did. Yeah, that was the easy chat.
Yeah. The only question they ever ask is, "Are you happy?" And if you are, then they do it.
That's fantastic, man. Big ups to your parents for being super supportive. But tell us about that journey, right? I mean, what were you doing at Bain and what kind of switched the entrepreneurial bug in that sense to move into Qrius?
So 2 things happened. When I was at Bain, I was working on a case that had been the best case in terms of sustainability. And Bain is very serious about stuff like you are happy as an employee, your lifestyle is sustainable. In consulting, that's very critical that you don't die on the job. Very high pressure. So our case was for 6 months the most sustainable, and we felt like you're adding a lot of value to the client. So in general, probably the happiest case for 6 months in a consulting firm. And so I was in a very happy place when I was at Bain, and I loved working there. And that was why I had to leave it, because my manager told me that, he didn't tell me explicitly, but he was just in general telling our team that if you want to switch from consulting, if ever you want to do something else, do it earlier, because later on your lifestyle is in your control. Your work adds more value. You just get happier. If you like it now, you'll like it more later. Plus, you will be more expensive. Like if you go into the market 5 years down the line, you'd have to take a decent pay cut or a decent future growth cut. And that will be a bad trade-off. Like it will be a difficult trade-off. It's easier to trade that off when you're just starting out. So usually people leave consulting because they are fed up of it. And I left it because I loved it too much. And I thought I wouldn't be able to leave if I continued.
You just went, it's not you, it's me, and right?
You're too good for me. Yeah. Kind of that. But I wasn't planning to do that. What happened was a friend of mine works in a VC that funded Qrius, which was a media company before I had joined. And this friend called me to Hayat one day, and I went like free food and free drinks at Hayat. So he got me drunk, and then he took advantage of me. He told me that there is this mattress company that we are investing in, and they make boring mattresses and they sell boring mattresses. Do you want to join? Of course, I did not want to. And then he just talked about Qrius. He just mentioned it offhand. There's also a small media company. They write articles about politics and economics, and they talk business and technology. And they're trying to get into advertising and content marketing and make it into the Vox of India and like Ogilvy and everything. And he just like sort of, and he knew I was interested in all that because he was my undergrad friend. In my third year, I took an internship in Leo Burnett. Instead of going the traditional placement route, I just like seeked an internship there.
At the Bombay office, the Big Apple Bombay office, that one?
Yeah. I sucked there. I kind of like did not do anything except play FIFA, but it was a good experience.
Right.
And I got to work with Mr. Tiwari, who was like the creative head at that time.
Right.
But yeah, so he knew what I was into. And then he just told me that if you want, I can connect you to the founder. He already likes your work. He knew I was vain as well, right? If he tells me that there's a fan who wants to talk to me, I'll be like, oh yeah, let me talk to him. And we talked, and I met Manan over coffee, and he was like, okay, if you want to join. I was like, okay, I'll join. And it just like happened overnight. And I quit Bain, I got my hair colored, and I joined Qrius.
Oh yeah, I saw a picture somewhere of your hair colored. I think that's the one I'll ask for when we do episode artwork. That'll be fun. But let me ask you a little bit more about Qrius, right? I went through the website, I went through some of the articles that you put out. Very, very interesting stuff. Markedly different from anything that other people might be doing in the market. And I should know, I look at content all the time. Tell me a little bit more about how you're reducing complexity in content. That seems to be a running theme with the kind of things that you do, where you're simplifying stuff or reducing complexity. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we have two businesses. One is the media arm, where we write and we publish articles about finance, business, economics, and our idea is to talk about stuff that explains things and doesn't necessarily report or give opinions on one side, but more something that will tell you the full picture,
right.
All opinions and a whole history of things and a whole timeline. So that's the idea on the media side. The guy who started this, Manan, he did this about 6 years ago, and he was at DU. And he had a whole bunch of people writing with him from DU on economics and policy. Right. And a few years into it, they started doing advertorials with some finance clients. And then those clients were like, hey, you guys write really well. Why don't you also write for us? So he started with thought leadership and ghostwriting for CXO. That was a small business then. That's about when I joined the company as well. And we realized that there's just a lot more money to be made in content. Plus, we were getting incoming requests. Like there was money waiting at our doorstep for us to open the door. So I was like, we were like, let's start producing content for us as well then. So now the bigger business is the content business, where we write for other people. And the theme still stays that finance is complicated. So most BFSI firms need someone to take their complex products or the education bit about stock market or anything about finance and simplify it for the audience, especially vernacular tier 3, tier 4, people who don't really understand the difference between Sensex and Nifty, right? If you want them to start investing in oil or gold, there's a long sort of awareness and education path that they have to traverse.
Right.
So what we do is we simplify financial content for everyone so people can understand and take a more informed decision. That's the basic idea. But now we are more into like just in general expanding into digital marketing, content, advertising, and figuring our way out from there.
Right. Let me double click on that for a second. How big is the team now?
The full-time team is 6 people.
Right.
But we have a giant team of freelance writers, video vendors, studios who we work with.
Right. So you diversified from like text into video, animation,
podcast, animations. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, let me ask you this then. With the whole theme of simplifying stuff, right? And I'm going to take this, give this a little bit of a twist inspired by your comics only. But when you try and simplify things so much, and I'm sure there is a use case for it in finance, and there's a use case for it with complex matters for consumer investment. But there is also a sort of general trend of dumbing things down for audiences around the country, right? I mean, you see it happening in our news, you see it happening in our entertainment. I mean, every single story coming out of traditional entertainment is just the dumbest down version of anything good, right? Do you think that there is a certain inherent danger in doing that, or are we losing the impetus and the emphasis on being thorough? Is that something that you encounter? Is that something that comes to you as well?
So, simplification doesn't necessarily mean, let's say, dumbing down the information. What we do is we talk in the language people want to read or listen in. So, anecdotes from life, the language that they use, the examples that they would understand. A lot of financial content still is driven by the American market, the language, the words, stories, key examples. We try to Indianize it. That's one. Second, we don't do advertising, we do content marketing. So we don't have to rely on, let's say, immediate impact or grabbing the eyeball and just like making sure that they don't leave for the next 30 seconds. Our use case is more ensuring that the audience keep coming back for 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, because finance is one, complicated, but two, it once a person is told they are there, like they're your customer, they won't switch.
Right.
So you want to lock them in for the long run and not just sell something small like an FMCG product immediately. So our whole approach is driven by that, where we build trust over months so that there is a sort of LTV of years for our clients.
Right. That's very interesting. And is there a framework or a sort of shorthand that you guys have come up with that really works? Something that you can share with us?
I think the way we differentiate is we don't work with content writers. We work with either ex-industry people or ex-journalists who understand what they're talking about and don't necessarily replicate existing stuff or create entertainment, but create insights and information. And that's where it gets easier to then use those insights and information creatively to explain stuff to people who are more used to the kind of, let's say, the content you're talking about, which is people are used to easy, consumable, bite-sized, on your face, slightly dumbed down content.
Right.
We want to take that language, but the meat is still intact.
Right. That's a very interesting way of looking at it. Take the simplified language that people are used to, but still keep the essence of what you're trying to say objectively true to what it's supposed to be. Are there any companies that you look at and say, hey, that's the kind of stuff we want to do, or that's the kind of approach we want to have? I know you mentioned Vox earlier, but any others that you look at and say, hey, these are the guys that are doing it right?
Like I was saying, we are both The Economist, and the way they write their stories, it's so simple. It's as if you're reading a fiction fantasy novel set in some world that is sort of mirroring our world. And if you can, I mean, again, that comes from a place of privilege where I'm sitting comfortably in my home and I'm reading about conflict in Africa or even in India. The way they write, they're telling the story and not reporting.
Right.
That's the kind of approach we want to take, where you retain the information, you retain the analysis, you even have opinions, but the way you write it is in a very simple story format.
Right, that's fantastic, man. I think there's a lot more of that the current information sphere needs to generate. I think a lot more young people getting into creating for young people and the world that we now live in. Let me come to the last bit, the last part of this episode, and ask you a couple of political things. Actually,
Okay.
I mean, with this whole non-linear, weirdly discrete consumption pattern that we find ourselves in, right? We have people, there is no sort of central source of information anymore. Everything seems to be tinged with agenda. Fake news is a massive, massive problem. How do you then retain, objectivity or that modicum of truth in when you're putting content out? Is that something that comes up in conversation, whether it's for your comic or at Qrius? How do you try and navigate that, try and keep the balance in that sense?
It is extremely difficult. But like I have learned that I have been wrong so many times about so many things.
Right.
Despite being, let's say, very smart and very bright all my life, I've still been wrong about so many obvious things that we have this policy of just like as a company and me personally and for my art as well, just be always be open to any opinion, because even though I might have been very thorough with my understanding of a subject.
Right.
If someone has a different opinion, it is coming from somewhere. They are not making it up for the sake of making it up. They either have a different set of belief or a different set of experiences or just different raw hearts. Something is different.
Right.
So our approach is to always just ask more questions. You find something that doesn't make sense, just ask more questions. And if you find something that's making sense to you but not to other people, then ask questions about why is it not making well? Where in my belief or my idea is the loophole?
I want to ask you this bit before I take you to my episode ending question is, let's get a little philosophical, right? You mentioned that all of these opinions tend to have some kind of a lived experience that may be larger than your own. Often it's just opinion, right? Often it's truth sort of uh, turned around for people's own convenience. How do you deal with that? How do you try and retain that modicum of truth in whatever that you're trying to put out, and yet try and bring in people's opinions and people's balance? And if you can give us an example of where you tried to crack this balancing act and it worked out, or maybe it did.
Let me think, because one, it is a very difficult question. You never know where you end up saying something that is horrible. And I have just been very cautious now because not because of what others would think, but because what if I keep saying something, I start believing it, and it's just difficult for me to then turn around my own thoughts. But let's say I like the last thing I posted was about body positivity, and for a long time I was of the opinion that yeah, body positivity sounds all good and great, but you've got to like be fit, you've got to be healthy, and for that you need to sort of work on your fitness and your body and like your food intake and everything. I was on the more extreme side where aesthetics were a part of the whole thing. I am still not absolutely certain as to, let's say, what's the right way to look at things. And when I posted it today, I focused on a single thought where my perspective was that I might not look healthy, I might not actually be healthy, and I might be aware of it or unaware of it, but that doesn't make me less person than anybody else. Like, I'm still a valid human being and I still have value just because I'm a human being. And now that's still like, it could lead to maybe people thinking that, okay, then, I'm allowed to be unhealthy. And that could actually lead to people choosing being unhealthy because like, hey, I'm still valuable. Is that wrong? Is that right? I still don't know. I'm still not completely, I'm still in the gray area. But there could be somebody who's, let's say, spent years and years of excruciating lifestyle pains just because they thought that, hey, if I don't fit a certain body image, I am not healthy. And if I'm not healthy, I'm not attractive, I'm not nice, I'm not valuable. Let me just try to get in a certain type of physique. I was that person for years. So if somebody comes and tells me that, hey, I don't care if I'm unhealthy, but I don't want to ever go back to that lifestyle where I was starving myself or just like hating myself for being unhealthy. I wouldn't want to change their opinion because as an individual, it's choosing their suffering. Again, there could be a moral debate as to how far is an individual allowed to choose their own suffering, and like the end is basically, are you the owner of your own life? Are you allowed to take it, or do you not have ownership over your own life? But the whole idea is that for me it's a gray area, and when people have opinions, I tend to not invalidate their experiences. For me right now, it's more about if your opinions are affecting you, I'll still be okay with it. But if your opinions are affecting somebody else and sort of encroaching upon their experience of life, for me, that's a problem. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it's still so gray for me. Yeah.
No, you totally are, and you're answering it in a way that I hadn't even thought about. So you totally are. I think that's a very mature and very significant way of looking at it, as opposed to being the black and white of things and being on this side of an issue or the other. It's very interesting.
But that's there, right? I just want to say that there are certain issues where like I would like to think there is a black and white. Like, I don't want to have a discussion with somebody who comes and tells me that, let's say, homosexuality is a sin, like, or it's a crime.
Right.
For me,
Right.
that is not an opinion. It's just like, listen, there is no two way around this. Either you are looking to kill some people off because of their sexual orientation, which they have no control over, or
Mhm.
you're on the side which says that, hey, it doesn't matter what your orientation is. You're allowed to live. I mean, I don't think there is a matter of opinion there. Like, I don't think there's a gray area there. I mean, you can't apply this stance to everything, I would say.
No, I agree with you. I think, like I said, very mature and very significant way of looking at things. Of course, there are issues that have a clear black and white, where on one side are an individual's rights to exist and live life the way they want to, and on the other side is bigotry, right? And I mean, there's no space for discussion with things like that. Let me ask you this one question. It just popped into my head. Wasn't part of what I'd originally thought I'd ask you, but I have a few minutes before we can wrap this up. So, do you feel, in general, in media representation, we tend to give an undue importance to what gets portrayed on big media or on mainstream or other media, as opposed to more sort of grassroots formative education? And again, may not be a right answer to this. It's just I'd love to know how you feel about this, right? Because we see this happen all the time. We talk about body positivity as a binary issue, equated to other formative stuff like maybe sexual harassment or bigotry, right? And it tends to get equated in representation culture, right? Somebody who said something about fat shaming gets equated to proper bigotry, right? Do you feel like we give way too much importance to how things are represented in media as opposed to how they're absorbed or how they're taught to people?
It's a very weird question because if I look at like my own life, I spend 2 to 3 hours on Instagram and very less time in the real world compared to how much screen time I have.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe my grassroots is actually big media. So like for different people, grassroots could like their reality could actually be their phone screen, and for some people, their reality is for now their physical world.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, how people are taught things is still in our control in the physical world. As let's say a society, an individual, I can decide what school I want to go to, or who do I want to talk to. But in the digital world, it's not. I don't think it's in my control. So big media ideally would mean something that is not in your control, right? Like if I had to define big media and like grassroots, big media would be something that is broadcasted to me, and I can't decide what is being broadcasted to me. While a grassroots could be something that I have some say over or decision over whether I want to be there or not. Uh, but I think that line is just being blurred by the idea that everyone's so connected now that what's being broadcasted is what is like your bigger reality now.
Sure, that's a very interesting way of looking at it. That maybe big media is the grassroots now, or social media is the grassroots now. Very, very interesting way of looking at things. Harshveer, brilliant having you on the show. I want to ask you my episode ender question, which is something that I ask everyone on that I have on. I want you to share one entertainment recommendation for my listeners. Could be a comic, could be a book, a meme, a movie, song, whatever you'd like to share with my listeners for them to get a little bit further in their own journey of learning empathy, maybe.
Oh, in the journey of learning empathy.
No, it could be anything. That's just me trying to lead you into something.
For me, it's wrestling. It's taught me a lot.
You mean like WWE or like Greco-Roman and freestyle?
No, proper like wrestling entertainment, not
Right.
wrestling the sport, but wrestling the entertainment.
Right. And any particular wrestler? Any particular reason?
So I'll have 2 points on this.
Sure.
If I have to talk about a particular wrestler, I'll talk about John Cena, who, when you look at it, he's the all-American, blue-eyed, built, Caucasian, like served like close to the army, patriotic. Like he's the typical like poster child of the American dream.
Right.
And still he's just so away from what you think of a typical privileged person like that. I don't know if people know what he does. He's a wrestler and all, he's popular and everything, but he also is the sort of face of Make a Wish And he's the person who's done the most make-a-wishes in the world. He's basically Santa Claus with six-pack.
Right.
And imagine, okay, you're somebody who's lived his life, who's living in so much privilege, who's so happy, so successful. And then you almost every other day in your life, you're meeting somebody who's 3 to 5 year old, who's about to die in a few days, who's aware that who's going to die. And you are the person who's you are their dying wish. What would that do to you as a person? Like, this little kid who's about to die wanted to see me before he dies. And to be able to survive that emotional onslaught over and over again, and to be able to do it and enjoy it and want to do it more, takes a very special heart. So that's the person I would want to talk about. And wrestling in general, it's so unique in the sense there is no other form of entertainment that is so long lasting. WWE, or in general any wrestling promotion, the popular ones, NJPW, the older ones, right? They've been going on for 30-40 years. So the storylines, the characters, like if you watch Game of Thrones, it's 8 seasons. If you watch Friends, it's 10 seasons. Simpsons, 20 seasons. Wrestling has been there for 40 seasons, 40 years. It's been 10,000 episodes. So these characters have such depth in their storylines. And then there are so many characters. And people who talk about anime and manga, they talk about the depth in the extent and the breadth and sort of the longevity of the series. Wrestling out compares every other form of entertainment there is, except real life, because those are real people who are living their life as a wrestler. Like in the movie Prestige, when they talk about, I don't know if you've seen Prestige, but I don't want to spoil it for you, but if you have, great. So the magician lives that life, right? For 60 years, the twins live as if they were one person. That's what wrestlers do. They live their character, and that gives them a depth that no other entertainment or character has. And the storylines, therefore, are just, if you go deep into it, there's no end to how much you can go into it. So I think wrestling is great. People just look down upon it because it's men wrestling in tights, but the storylines and the characters are amazing.
No, I mean, I was a big wrestling fan growing up. I don't get into it much these days, but I still try and keep a tab on vaguely what's going on. But I mean, great recommendation, man, Harshveer. Consistent with the uncommon wisdom that you bring through in your comics, and thoroughly enjoyed this chat with you. I'd heard from you that you're a really smart guy, but it's great to see that in the flesh. Thanks so much, man, for making the time. I hope you had fun on this episode as well.
Oh, I had fun. I got audience to talk for like an hour. Thank you for that.
Grateful audience. Thanks so much. That's it from me, Vineet Kanabar, on this episode of Storytellers and Storysellers. This is Vineet saying goodbye.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Want to wish you all a happy Diwali. Hope you had a great festive season. It's been a great week in terms of the kinds of guests we've had and the kind of conversations we've had on the network this week. Do definitely check some of these things out. On This Round's on Me with Gauri Devidayal, she had a great conversation with Garima Arora, who's one of the best known chefs in the world. It was just absolutely riveting. Do check that out. On States of Anarchy, Hamsini Hariran spoke about chronicling India's different wars. Again, really interesting episode. Check that out. Ashton had a very interesting episode on his show, The Habit Coach. It was called I Don't Feel Like Doing Anything. It's about how to overcome malaise just generally, and I thought really, really interesting stuff. Kumi Veana was the guest on Cyrus Says on Monday's episode last week, and she's an educator, and my God, it was such a fascinating conversation talking about the way education functions in India and some of the changes she'd like to see. Just really, really interesting stuff. Do give that a listen. On Uncle Please Sit, Anupam Manur was there with Joel and Tushar talking about the Indian economy, part 1 of a 2-part series. Second part will be out this week. You should definitely check that out. Lastly, I want to talk to you all about the Filter Coffee podcast. Karthik Nagarajan, who hosts that show, is on a little bit of a break. He's back with a banger of an episode. It is with Himura Maya, who used to run Landmark Stores, and they talk about the culture of bookstores and quizzing and all kinds of stuff. Really interesting conversation. Do check that out. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
Have you ever wondered how successful people do their thing? How do they navigate the challenges they often face? Are you wondering about the future of restaurants, film, education, technology, and everything else in between? Hi, I'm Gauri Devidyal, best known for being one of the brains behind The Table, an award-winning restaurant in Bombay. One thing my life as a restaurateur has given me is the opportunity to meet with some truly inspiring people, most often just by chatting with strangers at the community table. And that's what this podcast is about. It's about learning the new dimensions of business and understanding how different people swim this sea. It's an opportunity for me to pick their brains and ask them all the questions on my mind, whether it's about learning from their past experiences or talking about future trends. Through their journeys, stories, and insights, I hope you too, like me, will come away inspired and energized. So come, join me every Wednesday with your favorite drink because this round is on me.